There is no such thing as a shonen underdog. That is, admittedly, a pretty wide-reaching statement, and to be honest, if you took even 1 second to think about it, you would immediately know that I am very, very wrong. But, at the very least, I think you'll soon believe me when I tell you that being the underdog in shonen isn't the rule, it's the exception. The template for a shonen underdog is pretty simple. Start with a low-status protagonist, usually around, let's say, 15 years old, someone mocked, ignored, and underestimated. If you're feeling fancy, you can sprinkle in some supposed disadvantages, like having no powers in a world full of them, or some inverse disability that marks them as less than. Oh, and don't worry too much about managing its drawbacks. In like 4 arcs tops, this disability will somehow loop back into being a good thing. Of course, you can't forget to mix in some grand ambition, which is 90% of the time just becoming that world's equivalent to the president. And lastly, slap on some ridiculous willpower that will have the audience questioning whether or not the main character even has pain receptors, and bam! You've got yourself a certified shonen hero. But here's the catch. Time and time again, authors fall into the same trap. These characters are meant to be framed as nobodies, underdogs who clawed their way up from the dirt. But when you actually peel back the layers and really look at what the story is doing, something becomes painfully clear. They were never true underdogs to begin with. Whether it's hidden powers, divine lineages, the strongest mentor in the world taking them personally under their wing, or sheer narrative convenience, these protagonists often start the race miles ahead of other people just like them. And yet the story begs for us to root for them as if they're the least likely one to win. So the question is, are they really underdogs, or are we just being told they are? In this video, we'll be breaking down some of shonen's most iconic underdogs, character by character, and examining whether or not they truly deserve that title. So stay along, you might just learn something important. There are 2 main ways an author can frame a character as an underdog. One way is through their backstory and upbringing, and the other way is through their toolset. In the case of a backstory, you usually get a character who's lost their parents, comes from poverty, or a totally average background, and reasonably has no chance of succeeding. Of course, genetics should play a part in that equation too, but as you quickly begin to realize, while most shonen do a passable job of giving their protagonists a rough start in life, they completely drop the ball when it comes to their characters' genetics. It doesn't really matter whether or not you were born in a dumpster when you're literally part god. Speaking of which, let's take a look at one of the most iconic underdogs to come out of shonen, Naruto Uzumaki. Now, I'm not one of those anitubers who bait people with lukewarm, Naruto never worked hard takes. He did. He was an orphan who lost both of his parents the night he was born. The image of Naruto's loneliness, him being alone on that swing set, is extremely iconic within the anime community. In fact, Naruto's loneliness was so bad, it loops back around into the people around him being literally stupid. The whole village hated him, despite knowing there was a walking nuke sealed inside of him that literally fed on his negative emotions. So they hated this kid so much that it literally fried their brains. So here's where I break from the usual critique. A lot of people say Naruto isn't a real underdog because of how powerful he becomes, and how powerful he was destined to be. But to be honest, I feel like that's purposely missing the point. Naruto isn't an underdog in terms of ability or powers. He's an underdog in terms of emotional and moral development. Think about it, so many characters in Naruto's world fall victim to pain and hatred. Nagato, Obito, Sasuke. Naruto had every reason to become just like them. No parents, no friends, no guidance, just hate. Despite all of that, he still chose to be a good person. That's what makes him an underdog, not beating the odds in power, but beating the odds in character. Now, all that being said, If you believe that Naruto is an underdog in terms of power, then yeah, that's ridiculous. Naruto's dream of becoming Hokage feels much less like a dream and much more of a guarantee with the hindsight of the entire series. First of all, you have the Nine Tails, which, all things considered, is an earnest attempt at a double-edged sword, giving him immense chakra reserves at the risk of losing control. But if you track its use over the course of the series, you really only find Kurama benefiting Naruto much less than he limits him. As people very correctly pointed out in my last video, despite the narrative saying things like, version 2 will drain Naruto's life, there are very few shown consequences. But even without Kurama's chakra, Naruto is already plenty loaded. He's the son of the 4th Hokage, and Uzumaki clan royalty, a bloodline known for their massive chakra reserves and ridiculous vitality. Add on Naruto being the reincarnation of Ashura, giving him access to 6-path powers, as well as the fact that he was also labeled as the child of prophecy, and altogether you essentially get a ninja Jesus. Based on his background, Naruto was never not going to win. I don't believe Kishimoto actually had any intention of carrying that hard work beats genetic narrative far, but when you consider that part 1 message to the end of the series, I do have to admit it is pretty damn funny. So all in all, Naruto's genetics are pretty stacked, but they are nothing in comparison to Ichigo's. Ichigo Kurosaki is what happens when you suddenly decide to give your protagonist every major power system in your story. Kubo seemed dead set on making Ichigo match every villain he fought in terms of the abilities that they could use. So let's start from the very beginning of the underdog setup. The whole idea was that Ichigo is just a regular high schooler dragged into a supernatural war zone. That's the setup of the Agent of the Shinigami and Soul Society arcs. He borrows Rukia's powers, and while he's weirdly strong, it's nothing too outlandish. Yet. Then we start peeling back the layers. Turns out the Shinigami powers weren't borrowed, they were his all along. Okay, cool twist, I'm not gonna hate. Then we learn he actually has an inner hollow living inside of him that comes out only when he's in danger. A bit edgier, yeah, but who doesn't love an inner demon? After this though, it just becomes ridiculous. Ichigo is randomly handed out Fullbring powers so he can still stay relevant without his Shinigami powers. But that whole grand sacrifice is instantly undone as Ichigo gains his Shinigami powers back. Just like Uryu, Kubo doesn't really stick to the whole I'm losing my powers forever thing. Before you know it, it's the 1000-year Blood War arc. And you guessed it, he's also part Quincy. Now, if you know the story, you might ask, but aren't Quincy supposed to be poisoned by hollows? How could you have a child that's a fusion of both? Bro, don't worry. It's explained in chapter 14 of Can't Fear Your Own World. It's all chill. By the end of the series, Ichigo is part substitute Shinigami, part hollow, part Fullbringer but not really anymore, part full Shinigami, part Quincy, and part human. Even a 14-year-old me could not come up with an OC this stacked. Yeah, Ichigo is ridiculous. One big factor that defines a good underdog is the dream. That impossible goal they chase, even against all odds. That's what lies at the very heart of the genre. Watching someone who starts with nothing slowly claw their way towards something they should, by all logic, never be able to achieve. It's satisfying because it feels earned. So if you're going to do this properly, you need a character who actually worked for what they have. You want someone who actually managed to use their own effort and willpower to push through and achieve that impossible dream. And on that end, both Deku and Asta fail completely. Let's start with My Hero Academia. The entire underdog narrative begins with a powerful declaration.
Is it possible to become a hero even if I don't have a quirk? I'm a normal kid without any powers. Could I ever hope to be someone like you?
No! That even someone without a quirk can become a hero. It's a strong premise. For more context, you've got a world where 80% of the population is born with some kind of power called a quirk. Some people get to become walking missile silos, while others have spray bottles for heads. Deku, the protagonist, of course falls into the unlucky 20% with no quirk at all, which on paper is a perfect setup for the classic underdog material. Quick side note. The fact that Deku was constantly bullied for being quirkless is ridiculous. Like bro, that's 1 in 5 people. And the guy with stretchy eyeballs is literally right there. Anyway, the show sets up this noble, grand idea that Deku, despite his lack of powers, could become the greatest hero purely through willpower, a little bit of brains, and a lot of heart. Then immediately betrays that idea because it's stupid. So instead of having to work his way up with cleverness or grit, Deku stumbles into a conversation with All Might, who is essentially the LeBron James of heroes. Thanks to a combination of suicidal heroic tendencies, inability to read a situation, and general interference with licensed professionals, All Might decides, yeah, you get the magic juice. And just like that, Deku is handed One for All, single-handedly the most powerful quirk within the entire verse. And not just One for All, it turns out that that quirk comes preloaded with 6 extra quirks, as if the first one wasn't enough. It's really funny to think, Gentle Criminal tried the same kind of passionate, self-sacrificial shit that Deku pulled off, but instead of being rewarded a god quirk, his dreams fell apart. What annoys me most about My Hero Academia is that it almost commits to some semblance of an underdog premise right before throwing it away. Despite what I've said, I have no problems with One for All or even the 6 quirks attached to it. But in the early arcs, I loved how Deku couldn't rely solely on his quirk, and actually had to use his instincts alongside years of observing heroes from the sidelines to get ahead. There was this idea that all those powerless years had made him sharper or even more creative than his classmates, who had grown up relying on their quirks. The biggest example of this actually happens in the sports festival. Watching him win the race by using strategy instead of strength was genuinely one of the most peak moments across the entire series. But of course, the moment Full Cowling gets introduced, that mentality was dropped entirely. What once was a story about how having less can teach you more becomes yet another I get stronger so I win shonen. It's not that strength arcs or strength-based narratives are inherently bad, but when your whole premise was built around such a unique idea, it's just kinda disappointing. The funniest part of all of this is that you don't even need a quirk or 7 to kick ass. Hell, Stain's quirk just paralyzes people, but outside of that, he's still physically contending with some of the highest outputs in the verse. Or you even have Knuckle Duster from the spin-off, a guy with no quirk at all who's just smart, jacked, and effective. There was a path for Deku to stay grounded. The end of the series kind of proves this, but that path gets buried under layers of glowing power-ups and hand-me-down super quirks. Then you have Asta. Asta's situation mirrors Deku's in a lot of ways. Born into a magical-filled world with no magic, it's pretty much the same thing. Well, aside from the fact that Deku's quirklessness is 1 in 5, while Asta's is more like 1 in 8 billion. He's the only person in this entire world without magic. Despite this catastrophic birth defect, Asta still boldly proclaims that he'll become the Wizard King, which is basically the Wizard President. Naturally, this is completely ridiculous, and so the narrative has to bail him out. Enter anti-magic. At first, it's framed as a crutch. It's incredibly powerful in the right situation, nullifying any magic it touches, but it lacks the versatility and utility of regular magic. Much like early series Deku, the appeal of early series Asta was based on watching someone get by with just muscles and relatively simple magic and strategy alone. For example, Asta could not use Mana Skin, making him prone to dangerous magic environments. Black Asta. Okay, but Asta is unable to fly conveniently unlike other magic users, meaning he has to run wherever he goes the sword can fly. Okay, but he's still limited to short range and doesn't have AoE, right? Flying slashes. Okay, the sword has to at least touch the magic, right? AoE anti-magic. Let me be brutally honest here. Anti-magic is not a crutch. All of its limitations, counters, and drawbacks get patched out halfway through the series. And it's not even anti-magic's fault, it's the ridiculous magic paired alongside it. Most fans casually refer to Asta's magic as anti-magic, but that's misleading. The truth is, Asta actually has a god tier magic hybrid. He basically has two different magic types. Sword magic is fucking ridiculous. It allows the user to absorb spells on some renegade shit, levitate their swords, and somehow even grant anti-magic to other people. Yes, they imbued other magics with the magic that is meant to cancel magic out. How the hell does that work? Anyway, yeah, Asta's original declaration is completely wrong. Someone without magic can never become the Wizard King. Ever. Black Clover feels like watching a crippled, mentally inhibited homeless guy yell some shit like, "I'm gonna become the richest man in the world," before falling into an alley and receiving a $10 billion check because the world felt like it. I still love the show though. So, most contemporary shonen protagonists are complete frauds when it comes to the underdog fantasy. They all star some kid with god tier genetics who happens upon the best mentor in the world before receiving a power that essentially guarantees they're going to win. But if you remember what I said at the beginning, there are exceptions. And one true underdog, standing tall amidst a sea of fakes, is none other than Isagi Yoichi from Blue Lock. Isagi's story is a lot different from most other shonen protagonists. With how the genre is built, I wouldn't blame you for believing that Isagi had some kind of football-obsessed father who abandoned him at birth, forcing Isagi on a journey to conquer the world and claim his father's title. There are characters like that, yeah, but Isagi definitely isn't one of them. He's got two active, loving parents at home, no trauma dump, no dead family, just a normal kid with a crazy dream to become the best striker in the world. And instead of the story inventing some magical plot device to make that dream possible, Blue Lock just throws him into a meat grinder of competition. Sure, it sounds like an elite program, but if Igaguri can make the cut, the bar doesn't sound that high. What makes Isagi so much more engaging than other typical shonen underdogs is how he uses and earns what he has. Isagi starts off the series with two natural talents, high spatial awareness and a decent ability to volley the ball. Neither of these are impressively powerful to start off with, but across the series, you watch him refine those core skills into a weaponized toolkit that lets him rewrite the field in real time. Sure, some of his abilities are a bit exaggerated and occasionally come off as a bit ridiculous, but developing a powerful ability by oneself will always be more engaging than just receiving one. It's a true zero to hero story. Even when Isagi meets his idol, Noah, the best player in the world, it's not some magical mentor moment. In fact, to be honest, Noah did shit all to actually help Isagi grow, and if anything, more so used him as a tool or stepping stone to help Kaiser. It's a pretty unexpected subversion of Shonen's formula to see what should be a mentor character actually become a hidden antagonist, and to see Isagi say screw that and crush Noah's expectation and Kaiser's hope is genuinely so refreshing to see. So yeah, give your protagonist some form of guidance, but always remember to let them actually develop their abilities themselves. I promise you it is 1,000 times more engaging than just handing it out to them. So what's the point I'm trying to make here? Underdog stories are special. They resonate with the audience because they're grounded in something universal. We all want to believe that no matter where we start from, we can reach the top. Watching someone go from nothing to number one is inherently powerful. But these authors always take it 5 steps too far. They put their protagonists in impossible situations, while simultaneously making them reach for the most prestigious position in their world. And in the end, there's absolutely no logical way for the protagonists to achieve their goal. So, they have to cheat. They hand their underdogs god-tier powers. They bless them with elite genetics, or give them game-breaking mentors, creating a fallacy that breaks the underdog fantasy before it even starts. And honestly, if you're just going to hand your protagonist everything they need to succeed, then why even pretend they're an underdog? But I get it. It's tempting. It's a lot easier to write without actually limiting your protagonist, and audiences eat it up. But deep down, we all know the difference between someone who got lucky and someone who earned it. Because at the end of the day, the most satisfying stories are the ones where you can reflect on the fact that the protagonist truly started from nothing. No shortcuts, no handouts, just grit, willpower, and growth. Because those are the kinds of stories that give you hope, not the ones that give up halfway. Thank you for watching. Have any favorite underdogs from anime or other media? Let me know in the comment section down below. And if you enjoyed, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Anyways, as always, I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.